Okay, we're here. Welcome to another episode, Adventures in Business. We are here looking good, sounding good. Mandy, how are we doing today?
Hi, Amani. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Oh, man, we're doing great. I have to tell you, my cup is so full. My creative weirdo cup is full. I had one of the best Saturdays I've had in a long time. San Diego had this makers market where they had hundreds of artisans and it's at the Port Pavilion, so it's outside and it was 80 degrees and they had a bar and I had a glass of rosé and my husband had a tequila and we just wandered around this makers market and I got to see one of my favorite card makers and I bought some ornaments and coasters and they had one lady had this huge wall that said holiday happiness. And you can write one thing that makes you happy during the holidays, which the holidays are not happy for a lot of people. So to pick one, I think is fine. And
Right.
you stick it up on there. And that was so awesome. And then we went from there to the Ocean Beach Christmas parade, which
Mm,
is the most unusual Christmas parade of all Christmas parades. But it's so creative and it's so community based. And so I would say from 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. on Saturday, I was in just creative weirdo heaven. It was wonderful.
okay. And what did
Yeah.
you do on Sunday to recover?
I didn't watch the Browns,
That's
which
good. That's a
I
good thing.
know. I didn't. I did not watch any football Sunday, which is very rare. You know what? I caught up on some emails and I walked the dog and you know, cleaned the house. I watched a little TV. I had dinner with some friends. It's
Okay.
holiday party season, right? So I had like reunion dinner with some of my friends who we worked together more than 20 years ago. So it was really awesome
Okay.
to see them too. What about you? I want to hear about, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you had training for your book launch this past
Yes.
week, right?
Yes.
So
Yes, we did.
tell me about it.
I learned some facts. I'll pull up my notes here and share just some
Oh, fun.
things like because you're the stretch goal this time is to get on the USA Today's bestsellers list. That's the stretch goal. We'll see if we can get it. Doing a lot of like bulk sales with the book, five. So I changed my bulk sale kind of categories, like 5 books. I think it's 15 and then 75. And then I have a big one for 250 where I'll come and DJ. So I worked through that. I found out that if you're doing an audio book, to release it 2 or 3 weeks after the book so that you don't kind of dilute. I did not know that. So you knew that already?
I did because I released my audiobook 5 months later, intent by
Uh-huh.
design, because I released the book in October and then 5 months later, you get a natural dip after 90 days of book sales,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then I pre-promoted the audiobook, which you pre-promote an audiobook, it gets people interested in your physical book
Right. Right.
again.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
another thing you'll probably see when you have some space between those 2. When you release the audiobook, you're gonna have a spike in regular book sales too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm probably gonna
Mhm.
wait like a
Yeah,
month, maybe month and a month, 4 or 5 weeks. So we
that's
talked
great.
about that. We talked about doing a webinar to introduce the book. It was so much. It was that documentary. So it's just a lot of different things to do. And then there's an event in June, Black Music Month, which comes out that will also be good to kind of tap into. So it was just a lot of learning. Um, yeah, yeah. So that was kind of the training for the book, and we're just now my big task is I need to try to get some endorsements from people, from some artists that are in the book. And so I now I have to go through a strategy on social media where I have to DM them, email their contact person, send them all these messages, see where I can get a response and try to get through the third door to get them to give me a quote or read a portion of the book that I can use for my testimonial. That's like the next priority for the next month or two because we're about 2 months out from launch. So
Amani,
yes,
you gotta get Babyface. We
yes,
gotta
yes.
get Babyface to endorse this. We
So
have to.
we're that's what I'm working on now.
Okay.
And so that's a good summary of the training. It's just a lot of information. And all
Yeah.
while keep in mind, it's 2 more weeks left in the semester, so it's a lot of grading papers, giving exams, sitting there being present during group presentations. So yes, that's my world.
I feel like the book training was exciting, but a little stressful for you. Like you have a little wrinkle in your forehead. Is it like was it just because it was so much information or what?
Yeah.
Like what? Yeah.
A combination of so much information and then it's coming, like it's here. It's like, it's this, so it's just a lot going on. It's a lot, but we're ready. Everyone who looks at the book is like, wow, the pictures. Every single person is like, oh my gosh, the pictures. So
I mean, that's what
that's
you
great.
get when you
Yeah.
buy 163 Getty images.
Yes, yes, for sure. But it's well worth it. I can tell already. So, and you just notice little things, like I show someone the book, like, oh, the group, the cultures. Oh, is this song there? What about this group? Is that song there? It's just so interesting. You never would think about that, but yeah. So then I have to add in, how I do my 3 videos per week about answering questions. I got to add in probably one about the book once I get a physical copy that I can kind of show. So we're just building the foundation.
I like the book teaser. I think your videos by the way, if you are not following Amani on all the platforms, follow him because those he's doing these videos about the music business, about little nuggets of things I had no idea about. And
Yeah.
this is so when you talked about the advanced signing
Yeah.
and just some of the financials and just the stuff for music scores for
Yeah.
movies. I didn't know any of that, and I'm learning along the way as you're
That's
doing
good.
it. It's pretty
The
awesome.
one today, I have my dog with me doing it, so that's a fun one today too.
Oh,
So take a look at that. Yeah, makes his first appearance.
dogs are good content.
They
Dogs and
are. They
husbands.
are.
Yeah.
Speaking of first appearances,
Yes.
tell us who we get to talk to today. I got questions. I'm ready. Who we speaking to today?
Well, we have a really cool new friend, stranger at first, but now a new friend who is going to be on the show. His name's Malcolm Peace. He is the president of a company called Set Sarah. He knows how to make your business attractive to buyers. He comes at it from the buyer's perspective. He's a private equity expert. He's a transition specialist, and he is the president of Set Sarah Growth Partners. So, Malcolm, join the club
Yes,
here.
he's on your screen there. Round of applause. Yes,
Thank you both for having me.
Yes, we're happy to have you. We start off with some kind of fun introductory questions, but I am curious, since you're born and raised in Austin, how did you make your way to James Madison for school, which is close to where I'm from. I'm from the DC area, so many of my
Yeah.
classmates went to JMU. How did you make your way there and then return back?
Yeah, great question. Great question. I wish it was some like whimsical way of, but it was just these small little conversations. I think that in some regards, Texas, it feels like it's country on its own. So there, in many ways, I feel like people either come here for a little while, they're like, oh man, it feels like so far, you can't takes forever to drive anywhere. So you have to get out at some point in your kind of career or life. And so mine was, post high school, going into college, wanting to go somewhere else, somewhere different. And so ended up on the East Coast. And it was just by way of a conversation that someone else played on the tennis team on the women's side, actually, that I had met, that she just spoke really, really highly of it. So, I wish it was some whimsical
Yeah.
story of sorts, but it was just, I happened to meet somebody that told me about it. It was a kind of a regional school at the time. It's kind of made a national presence now. But, honestly, I remember the day I crossed into the Shenandoah Valley and it was kind of turning into fall leaves, colors, and all this kind of stuff that I was like, okay, this is the place I want to be. And so, life continued to unfold and made great connections. And it just, ended up being a place to be for a little while in the Shenandoah, Charlottesville area. And yeah, Virginia will always be a special place in my heart. I try to make it there at least once a year. We'll be going there for New Year's timeline with the kids, get to go skiing kind of in the mountains area. And yeah, always try to make it a trip. So definitely a special
Love
place.
it. How do you compare living in Austin to living in Harrisonburg, which is where James Madison is?
Man, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm so fortunate at the time, but I never realized how fortunate I was at the moment. My first apartment, I think, was like $500 for a 2-bedroom
Yeah.
apartment. And, you wouldn't get anything like that in Austin these days. So coming out of school, starting out, didn't make a whole lot of money, just kind of scraping their way through to learn new things and get the skills, kind of the true worldly skills that you need post kind of the theoretical from college. It was a great place to kind of get my feet wet from that perspective and just learning and networking and kind of building a network there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's so entirely different. The farmers markets on Sundays, you can still find those here in Austin, but it's just a totally different kind of feel. And, all that to be said, I think Austin has a uniqueness to its own. And I'm grateful to be here today. But yeah, it was a very fortunate opportunity to kind of get my career started in the Virginia area.
Well done. Mandy, over to you.
Well, I want to dig right in, Malcolm. So
Sure.
thanks for being here. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for reaching out. I want to share that too is we get pitched. People pitch us a lot to be on the show. We don't always say yes. Malcolm pitched us. It was a great pitch. And we said yes. And I want other audience members to know, pitch us if
Yeah.
or suggest people if you think they're great. But so thank you for reaching out. We love that. I just want to dig right into something I think might be an emerging problem or trend, however you want to look at it, in small businesses and with baby boomers. So, baby boomers with family businesses right now, right? They're approaching the late 60s to 80s range. This business might have been in their family for multi generations, and now they want to retire or they want to leave the business to their kids or their grandkids, but their kids or their grandkids do not want to continue the
Yeah.
business. So, how can they exit in a way that makes them feel good about their legacy? Or what do you think about this emerging problem? And is it an opportunity for those of us out there thinking about investing in a business?
Yeah, I mean, great questions. I'll try to catch all of them. You asked some good ones. I think the big thing to note is a lot of these business owners that have no son, niece, nephew, or daughter to transition the business to, they are often looking for what does this look like, or they just kind of want to keep it going as long as they can. So that's always the tension point. I was talking to somebody last week. We're looking at a business in Houston right now, and there's another very complimentary business that he had brought up in the conversation. And, you know, the other owner is 84 years old and still wanting to have something to do during the day. So there's all that tension going on there of, you know, there's a need to transition. There's not a natural person to take it over in their family. And so as a result, we come into the conversation trying to just guide them for a little bit. I'm not trying to pressure, not trying to rush. I'm about to turn 34, and candidly, I've got probably 3 decades or more to keep doing this. And so I'm not in any hurry. And I want to do the right thing by the business that we get to steward and take care of. So yeah, we're never in any rush. And so we're always trying to guide people through what their true options are. And some people will say, you know, give me a couple of years. Some people say, I'm ready to do it right now. It just depends. And we're just trying to be there at the right moment and do it right by the employees, as well as all the people that have cared for the business over the years.
So if they want, that's awesome. I appreciate hearing that because I think sometimes people feel like this urgency, and that causes some stress,
Yeah.
and they don't want to exit, or they do want to exit, but they want to do it gradually. So if people are thinking about selling their business and they know it's something they want to do down the road, but maybe not right now, what are some ways that you've helped people in the past prepare to sell?
Yeah, great question. You know, I think honestly, most of the time that people want to be in a position where their business is set up to be able to continue as it is, and having to have that kind of conversation of, okay, if it continued this way, and there's a natural transition that sometimes people experiment with is called an ESOP, which is basically an employee stock option plan. And it's an option, not to get too particular, but it's just an option for employees to buy the business eventually.
Hmm.
And when you go down that path, you have to ask yourself, okay, if this business continued to exist as is, and I completely removed myself, what would happen? And some owners are like proud, you know, they're proud of like the involvement that they have, and they're proud of, you know, their spouse's involvement or whatever it might be. And, you know, at the end of the day, all those things are great, and you've put in your blood, sweat, and tears, and your family is sacrificed. But if you removed yourself, what would actually exist? And sometimes I've got a good friend who calls himself the CEO. And the reason he calls himself the CEO is the chief energy officer. And it really is like every day he's got to show up and just like push it for people to really want to, you know, see something happen special. And, you know, if that's the case and you're in your 60s and later kind of in life and you're kind of pondering all these types of things, you're the one that has to bring that energy. The business might not survive after what you're doing. And we need to prepare for that now. And it tends to take about a 2-year process to really do it well. And so, you know, we focus on business owners that have kind of run up against certain circumstances like that, and we try to guide them with as much time as possible. But we also want to be realistic of here's what we're looking at, and to be able to mitigate the risk when we're buying or guiding you through this process. We want to be able to, you know, set the business up for a decade, you know, kind of life afterwards. So, anyways, that was a lot of little details, but there's a lot of nuances there.
I like the pacing of it. There's a rhythm that doesn't feel so scary because a lot
Sure.
of times people make this decision because they have to, not because they want to. So I think my takeaway from what you said is like, You could talk about it now, but you don't have to do it for 20 years, but at
Yeah.
least start the conversation so you're not put in a position to rush.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say it's all with good intention, and I think that it's us being in the right place at the right time, but also over a long period of time. This is a very important transition that has super emotional aspects to it, and yeah, sometimes it's just sitting with them and just talking through what this could look like, and knowing that it could be a long time. I've sat in living rooms with golden doodles jumping all over me, and I've talking to folks that are first generation Americans with very strong accent from other country that have immigrated, and they've got this business started, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate it, but they don't really want to run it, but their parents want them to. I mean, you name it, this full
Mm,
spectrum. And so yeah, it's always important to kind of have that long-term perspective in our seat.
it's
So
awesome.
if people are maybe debating whether or not to sell their business, what's the way you love to show people how they can calculate the value of their business in the current time period?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to do it. Not to get too nuanced, but the best way to think about it is a multiple of earnings is kind of usually the easiest way to think about it. Over kind of a series of 3 years is kind of the simplistic way to view it. Sometimes a more appropriate way, depending on the industry, is a multiple of revenue, depending on how steady that revenue is. And then you can kind of look at it and say, with a conservative number of 1 to 2 or 3 times X on the revenue. And again, I'm speaking from a perspective. We buy blue collar industrial type businesses in Texas. We're not buying the latest SaaS business that is flying off the shelf. So you have to take my kind of perspective with a grain of salt. There's different folks that invest in different ways, and they have different risk tolerances than I do. We like to buy something that's been steady Nelly for 60, 70 years potentially, but at least 10 years. And so as a result, like, they tend to be kind of flat. The business owners made a couple $1,000,000 a year. They're doing really well for themselves, probably more money than they ever expected. And so we'll take some sort of multiple applied to that earnings at the end of the year, whether it's 1, 2 million bucks. And we'll say, okay, your business is worth $5, $6 million, and this is how we can structure it so it transitions well. And this is how we're going to have to look at from a debt and a leverage perspective. And we don't really want to leverage this thing crazy because we know that there's months where it maybe doesn't do as well as others. So all these things are part of the conversation. But simplistically, you take your net earnings and you multiply it kind of by your industry standard, whatever industry you're in.
Okay. And then you mentioned this earlier in your answer in terms of you really are focused on buying like kind of blue collar businesses and not the SaaS businesses. In your opinion, what are the best kind of businesses to look to purchase? I was listening to a podcast. This is very ironic. I believe it was
Yeah.
the Tuesday or Wednesday. It was a young lady. I think it was her name. I'll look up her name. She was talking about buying businesses as well. She mentioned, like, of course, laundromats, vending machines, and some other
Sure.
types of businesses that are good to buy where you can kind of get a consistent income. What's
Yeah.
your perspective on what to buy?
Yeah, fair question. I've seen people make money in all sorts of ways. I've been
Mm.
surprised. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that this is a blanket statement for us. We focus on business to business type businesses rather than business to consumer, B2C.
Got it.
There was a phase of my life where we did a lot of hospitality deals. I was a kind of minority partner in some different things, and in a restaurant and all this kind of stuff. Those are tough businesses, but the people that do it well, I've seen them do it really, really well. So
Yeah.
it's, for me, it's not a one size fits all kind of circumstance. I've seen people make money in unique ways. But I think one of the things that I've learned in our journey, and I would say we're kind of in the walking phase right now. There was a crawl phase, and we were very much infanty kind of style, trying to figure things out. We definitely have a team, and we have a purpose and a mission and goals and all these types of things that needed to kind of be formulated. Initially it was, let's go see what sticks and where we can add value. We still have that in our genesis of kind of what we do and the ethos of what we are. But at the end of the day, we've learned to stay away from certain things too, where we just feel like we can't add value. So that would be the question I would ask myself if I'm considering buying businesses is, there's no passive income, in my opinion. And there's only so many boats you can fill with your time. And so as a
Mm.
result, you've got to be conscientious about where can I tangibly add value. There's a lot of great financiers out there that can kind of create a deal. But I think that, right now with some of the things going on, just economy wise, on high multiples and expectations on business sales, it's people are being pushed to figure out, where do you add value in the transaction? Where do you add value in operating this business for, a decade, for the coming future? And so that's the way we've looked at it.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Mandy.
Well, yeah, I think you talk a lot about companies de-risking their business and
Yeah.
how the way so many entrepreneurs operate is risky, or maybe it gives you a little heartburn when you first talk to them. Although you can see it, you can see the vision of how to like de-risk it, right?
Yeah.
And I want to talk about staffing for a second because I feel like that's a really risky thing that entrepreneurs don't even realize they're doing. And so many entrepreneurs, they just put a band-aid on their staffing problem, right? Like they gathered, I think I heard you say the hired hands, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I've been guilty of this in the past, not now, but in the far distant past. Like you just gather people to solve some problems for you, just to get some done or to fulfill
Yep.
some tasks or to do some projects instead of skilled workers that actually are trained or they can manage like a long-term business role. So
Yeah.
what's the long-term problem with that when entrepreneurs are just hiring, hired hands instead of like a skilled worker?
Yeah, great, fair question. I'll say this, that at different phases within the business, it's going to need different things. And so what we specialize is kind of 3 to 12 million in revenue. That's like our sweet spot. We've looked above that and we've looked below that, but that's like really our sweet spot. And the reason that that sweet spot's there is, one, we can add the value, and two, the business has the ability to hire more skilled, specified people rather than these generalists or the quick contractor that you need or whatever it might be that you're just kind of scrappy to figure out. And so, all that to be said, you can start defining certain roles, you can create an org chart, you can do all these types of things. And when you're sub a million in revenue or kind of low seven figures, a lot of the time you're just meaning to be scrappy, and people are cross trained everywhere and they have no real definition of title, or their title is very arbitrary or what have you. And when we come into these businesses, and you can see it on kind of our 100-day plan, within 2 weeks, we establish the first org chart, usually the business has ever had. And that's always an interesting conversation. One, people are like, wow, this is who I report to, had no idea. And then two, this is what my title is. What does this actually mean? And so, a lot of people, have never had a employment agreement. They've never had any of these true documents that are pretty common in larger companies, that you have to establish those kind of standards. And then you come to find out, okay, so where does everyone fit in to move the boat forward? If you have one core goal and everyone's doing all this work, is it just kind of maintaining the paddle in the middle of the ocean, or is it actually moving us across? And so those are hard conversations to have, and sometimes people just kind of self-realize that. And sometimes you have to have those conversations of like, this was what it would look like for you to continue to grow here, and want to have the aspirations you tell us you want to have. So anyways, those are always kind of the situations we run into on those early days.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's just a good reminder of whether you're sub seven figures or you're multi seven figures or high seven figures or eight figures, the certain staff isn't going to put a band-aid on it. Everything has to have an intention and be thoughtful. For those that are sub seven figures or low seven figures, but know that they can go so much further,
Yeah.
what is something that they might be able to do over the next couple years that will catapult them?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So how I guide people. So from time to time, I'll do some consulting with folks that maybe just aren't ready to sell or just need some help in kind of the things that they're going through in that moment or what have you. The way that we look at it is we create that org chart and we start taking everyone's name off the org chart. So and so is a supervisor, so and so is a manager, so and so is a laborer, or whatever their title might be. We take all those things off, all those names, and we just have an org chart to what the business needs to function at the revenue that we're trying to achieve or the revenue we're currently maintaining. We say, okay, here are all the roles that are required. And in some business models, that's 5. In some business models, that's 50. It just depends on the business that you're in. And in all that to be said, we take all those names off and we say, okay, for this particular role, for it to be quantifiably good, like it's someone's doing a good job in this role, what's the one thing we would want to see? And if you're in the lawn care business, it's like you cut a straight line, or whatever it might be, you bag well, or, on those labor sides. Or if you're a manager, you have everyone show up on time, or you hire well. Or for our supervisors, they are required to hire their own team, which was a huge shift. And so, that's one of the metrics for us is, can you maintain and hire a team that stays for at least 2 years on these particular roles? And if I've taken your name off of that, and I say, here's your new job, and this is what your KPI is related to that, do you want this job? And that's a tough conversation, right? Some people say, hold on a second, I don't want to do that. And I have one supervisor who's become a dear friend, and I really like him now, and we work really well. But man, that first year when I was like, you got to take these blinders off because you're responsible for these people. Like, you can tell me, you get X, Y, and thing done, but you're coming in and you're working 70 hours a week just to get it done. And you're not responsible, to me, in my perspective, you're not being responsible to the people you've hired. It was a tough adjustment. And now he kind of works like 40, 45 or something like that. And it's kind of a better lifestyle. But at the end of the day, it was not a sustainable risk from a risk perspective. It was not sustainable the way it was set up in that particular situation.
Interesting.
Good advice. Yeah.
Now, when you're doing the org chart and you're looking at like the CEO or the founder, in your experience, what have been the most notable characteristics that really let you know that this business is successful and can continue to be successful if they stay?
Yeah, great question. So if they roll over, meaning they stay with the business, either we bought them, they roll over to some form of function. We always buy majority position, just to clarify. So there is instances where the owner will transition over, but it'll be for a very distinct reason, for a period of time or what have you. And the reason that is because we do believe that the owner got the business to a certain level, and it may need new leadership to take it to that next level. And that's only a structure of either the previous owner is like making more money than he ever expected, or she's making more money than they ever expected, or they're comfortable, right? Like, why would you go and disrupt your world when you're making $1 million a year and it kind of works? You have a little bit of headaches throughout the year. You've got some employees that you've got to deal with, and some vendors you've got to deal with, and maybe some customers that you've had to fire and get rid of because you don't want those customers on your revenue side of things. But at the end of the day, it's like, why would you disrupt it? And that's probably what we run into more often than not, is that they're kind of just humming along and doing well, and they don't really want to change anything. But in my belief, there's a lot of ambitious people on that team that's already been there and kind of bought into the vision, that wants to be able to see where the business can go. And so as a result, with that owner is, let's go get you into a specific thing that you can go concentrate on. Or you go be the absolute best hirer and morale driver and all those types of things, and get better and better people that want to be a part of kind of the KPIs and measurements that you're looking for. And I know that sounds a little bit robotic, but to be honest with you, when it flushes itself out for the HR side of things, you start realizing like, okay, this person really doesn't want to show up on time every day. And it's like, hey, the culture is going to be that. We're going to show up time, and we've got dashboards that sit out in the shop, and it shows when everyone showed up that day. And those are tough things. And I think it goes back to kind of the culture I like to build, where it's, it's full out transparent. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I think that at the same while, I think that we can recover from a lot of those mistakes. So let's share them and let's learn from that rather than hiding them. I think there's a big culture of, let me protect myself in business. And so as a result, you hide the errors. And that's a tough one to overcome for some folks. And so that's just been my experience.
Now, where do you, like, how do you discover potential businesses that are up for purchase? What's your kind of business development process in that avenue?
Man, we've done a lot of things. So we buy exclusively in Texas, blue collar industrial type businesses, which that sounds really broad. It's pretty much any B2B business where people's hands get dirty. If it's some B2B business that people's hands get dirty outside of oil and gas, because there's some people that just specialize just in that, we'll kind of look at it. And right now we're concentrated on some manufacturing niches. And then we're also looking at government contracted services. And so those are kind of our key things of 2024. But for instance, I went to Chicago a couple weeks ago. One of my analysts had drafted up everybody that was participating. We looked at every Texas business. We had prepped the night before in the hotel room and said, okay, these are all the ones that we're going to go do. And we walked around for 2 days, and I pitched every single one of them for 2 days straight. And so we do some machinery in the food processing industry. And so I just walked around this Chicago event and just went to every single one. And we walk away with 10, 15 people that are interested in having a further conversation. And we say, let's go from there. And so we have one that probably will go under LOI this week, for that matter, that came directly from that. And so that's what we do a lot of is relation driven, because what I'll tell people, anybody that wants to buy a business, you can buy a list out there. You can grab every kind of possible list. Every tool's out there in the world now to buy a list of things. but it's finding your way into the door is the harder process. And you've got to find a way to kind of, marinate the conversation, marinate the relationship, and build that over time. And you can't make that up through some sort of new funnel, in my opinion. Though we have them, they are very purposeful in other ways, but it's a lot of hand-to-hand conversations and just points of interest with people that we've gotten to know.
So
Awesome.
building on that, do you have a story? You don't have to tell the name of the business, but do you have a story where you ended up buying a business that wasn't ready to sell at the time you approached them?
Yeah, fair question. There's been more often than not where it's been they're still on our radar and we're still having those conversations more often, just because we're trying to buy 10 businesses over the next 10 years. And that's just kind of a rough number, right? So if we have one transaction a year, we've had about 300 kind of reviews, another 50 or so true conversations about selling. All those numbers are kind of arbitrary. Every year is kind of different depending on the landscape of things. But, at the same while, what I started when I was kind of speaking back to kind of hospitality days previously, where I got started was I was running some projects. We were doing some construction projects in this partnership that I was a part of. And every single vendor that we hired to do the construction here in the Texas Hill Country, they were the top person in the area and they were the owner that would come out and see me. And so it started out kind of conversations like that, where it's saying, hey, I just don't want to put this in front of you, but like, you've got a great reputation. You show up on Google first with 400 reviews of all 5-star plus. And it's, let's go have this conversation about what this looks like. And, still to this day, there's a few that we're still having conversations, and we've put an offer and then they've backed away. And it's like, hey, this is a great business. And at some point you're going to have to sell. So, those are kind of our circumstances. This is one of those situations right now that we're probably going to go under LOI on that, they don't have to sell. He's young enough. He's still capable, but it just would make sense. And so it just, can we fit in, add value to these circumstances? And that's really the pitch. And I have lots of great people that have sent me, more than enough references of folks that are kind of interested in this and what they would be, considering if they were to sell. And it's sometimes it's just educating them. Hey, this is what it could look like. Here is an actual buyer. We could transact with you. And we could run your business for the next decade. Here's what it would look like. And so, just to be candid, I mean, sometimes those conversations are still going 3 years later. So that's kind of our horizon and how we think about it.
I love that. And I want to pirouette for a second to something different is I've heard you say before that the business is a byproduct analogy, right? Like kind of like going to the gym or being consistent, like what you focus on is what ends up showing up, right?
Yeah.
So could you share a little bit about your philosophy of like the area that we focus on in our business is going to be the strongest area, but it's not really always what the business needs. The business is a byproduct idea.
Yeah, fair question. So I have come to realize that my thoughts are probably an aggregation of everything that I've heard or kind of formulated in the shower at times or whatever it might be in moments. So we have a philosophy that I probably stole from somebody, and I wish I could give it credit. I've never been able to find where it came from, but we call it, and it probably has a different name somewhere else, but we call it the top-down P&L approach. And I really preach this. This is kind of one of our main frameworks, and I really drive it home with the whole team. So the P&L is broken into 3 sections. It's your revenue, kind of the makeup of your revenue, your cost of goods sold, and all your expenditures outside of that. And there's nuances to that, but generally speaking, those are the 3 sections. And we always prioritize in that order. If it's a revenue related item, it will always come first, no matter what. If it's a customer that we could make more revenue with, it's a quote that we can get out quicker. Is it diversification? It's a customer we've never had before, so we want to find a way to win that business. Whatever it might be, it will always come first. And then the second is cost of goods sold. Can we hire better people? Can we do things differently to optimize? Can we create some ERP system that makes it quicker and specialer to get through all those types of things in a day? That's kind of the second tier of focus. And then the third is everything else operationally. Bookkeeping, the phone systems, the X, Y, and Z. If it doesn't impact those top 2 in the front, it is definitely the last and third. And that's hard, right? Because I think that a lot of people have their different skill sets. Some people are just not revenue oriented. They don't see, hey, I didn't get that thing or that drawing, CAD drawing didn't get done in time, and so as a result that jeopardized the revenue opportunity. They don't see that connection. And I'll tell you, I definitely stole this from somebody. I had a call with a guy that recruits on the sales side and talks about all bunch of different things on that related things. And he said that as you grow business, if you are a good leader, you have the ability to create the dots connected between all actions that people do and the outcome you're trying to do. If you can create an understanding amongst your team of this action has this kind of outcome or this correlated effect, that's where you really become effective at kind of driving culture and driving people. And that's been just the core of what we do. We use the top-down P&L approach. If someone says, hey, I'm working on this today, and I know it's like third in that rung, like I will correct that. And I'm just being honest. That's just kind of my hard and fast rule. Like if we have something else that could be revenue or COG related, and it's, you're doing something operationally, we definitely try to course correct that.
Okay, I love what you just said, because in my sales coaching practice, this comes up all the time, where an entrepreneur or a business leader is like, I can't figure out why we're not producing the revenue. And then when I break down like a timestamp of their day,
Yep.
they're focusing on sending invoices. They're not outsourcing the non-revenue producing things. They're focusing on like, whatever, like content on the internet, whatever it is. And none of it is, have you talked to a customer? Have you sent emails to a customer? Have you gone face to face to see a customer? What revenue producing activities are you doing? And when you look at like those 40 tasks in a day, I would say the heavy lifting is on that lower level that you're saying. The heavy lifting is on the administrative tasks. And I get it, as an entrepreneur, sometimes it's like those are deadline oriented, or those are easier to do, so I'm just going to do them. And people do have hangups about the sales process, so they push that to the side. But when you do it like you're doing it, and which is what I'm preaching all the time, revenue producing activities are king. And when you're prioritizing that, then you're definitely going to grow your business. So I'm happy that you said it from a P&L standpoint, because I think that's a better visual than me just preaching about like what are you doing with your revenue producing activities.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, sounds silly, but some of the guys that I work with that have really, built our business, and I have so much gratitude for, like, they've never been taught a business class before. So we'll sit down and have a family lunch and we'll have these conversations. I'm like, hey, this is where my mind's at. Then they're like, well, we've got this, that, and the other, and I need a new tool here, or I need that. I'm like, dude, let's go earn another $1,000 to buy that tool. Like, that's how I'm thinking about this. I'm not thinking about your angst that the tool maybe malfunctions today, though I want you to be safe. Like, I've got to go figure this out, because that's a COG, that's a fulfillment side of things that you're trying to do. But I want to produce the revenue that corresponds with that first. And so, that, again, it's just trying to lay out a framework that people can simply get behind. And it just so happens to be 3 sections, kind of easily, consumed. And that's just kind of the way we think about it.
Excellent.
Nice. Now we've come to the part in the show where we flip the script and let you ask both myself and Mandy a question, any question you'd like. So, who do you want to ask a question to first, and what is that question?
Man, Amani, I want to hear about your book and how you thought about that in correlation to all the other things you've got going on. Because I think that's one of the challenges of entrepreneurship, is to stay focused. And I'm not trying to throw you, to the wolves and figure out if you're focused or not. But I'm merely asking, that's a challenge. I think that's a challenge for everybody. I went and looked at a business owner, a business a couple of weeks ago, and he had a whole podcast set up and all this kind of stuff. And he was telling me about, he wishes he could diversify his revenue. And so we had that conversation. So anyways, that's the real. But yeah, I'd love to hear about your book and how it fits into everything you're doing.
So thank you for asking. The book is on the history of R&B groups from the 50s to the 2000s. It also gives you a whole chronological order of every group, the top 10 per decade. And then it talks about what happened to the genre, R&B groups, why did it disappear, and what's going to happen next. So how I have been working all year to get this in alignment is that I'm a professor, so I teach music business at Cal State University Fullerton. So it kind of falls in line with that. I also coach people in the music industry on how to make better business decisions. And then my kind of agnostic keynote speech is on 7 keys to unlocking your creativity, resilient and brilliant. And I tie in music with that also. So it kind of all falls in line with what I do. And then the book is really designed to, further establish me as a subject matter expert and open myself up for more speaking opportunities and business opportunities.
Yeah. So it's lead generation and it gives you credibility. Love it.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
super cool.
Perfectly good.
I like the last part about just where it's going. I think that that's got to speak into a lot of what you're teaching about, because I once heard someone say, you know, it was in a different period of life, but I was a college tennis coach at one point and listened to the dean of the business school, and he was talking to our players, and he said, every job that you will get will most likely be not existent right now. It will be a new job. There will be new aspects. There'll be all this is always kind of coming and changing, whether you realize it or not. And so I think that's wise, you know, kind of looking at the history and how it kind of points to the future. So good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I think, Mandy, you're up.
Yeah, Mandy, I'd love to hear. So I was actually in the San Diego airport coming back a little while ago. Are you from that area, based in that area? And if so, what have you seen? Because that airport's tiny compared to what the population growth is. And so walk me through that.
Yeah, so I've been in San Diego for 24 years. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally.
Okay.
Hence the reason for the Cleveland Browns talk at the front of the
Yeah.
at the front of the show. But I've been in San Diego 24 years and I grew up in Cleveland 24 years. So next year I guess I could officially say I'm a local to San Diego because
There
I
we
will have
go.
been here longer than Ohio. But I've seen huge growth here. In fact, the airport's expanding and it's needed to expand. The San Diego airport's needed to expand for many years, and it finally is expanding, which is great. And I think what a lot of people don't realize from a tourism standpoint, our airport is so close to everything. You
Mm,
can't go, there's so few cities you can go to where the airport's 15 minutes away. Like I think about Denver, where DIA is like 40 minutes from downtown, or most airports are 30 minutes away. So I've seen it grow. It had needed to happen quicker than it did, but I'm very glad it's happening. And I think when people think of San Diego, they think of just a sleepy beach community,
mm,
and they don't realize we've got the mountains, we've got hiking trails, we're close to Mexico. The food scene in here is so spectacular. It doesn't get the credit, like San Francisco and New York and Las Vegas get all the credit for being great food scenes, and they are. But talk about family owned businesses.
yeah.
There are multi generations of family owned businesses here that are restaurants that have amazing farm to fork foods or organic foods, or they just have reinvented their wheels over and over again too. So I don't think San Diego gets a bad rap. I mean, everybody loves San Diego, but they primarily think of the beach or the weather,
Yeah.
but they don't think of some of these other cultural things that are, I think, really important to the DNA here.
It seems, you know, just totally outsider, you know, never lived in California before. It seems as though people plant roots there versus LA. Unless you have been there for generations, you tend not to plant roots for too long. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
I've always kind of wondered.
Yeah, I feel like people plant roots. I only have a couple friends here that are from San Diego. It's very
Yeah.
rare to find like a true San Diegan in the wild. It's great when you do, but most people are from the Midwest, or they're
Yeah.
from different parts of the country, or from the East Coast. And people do come here and plant roots. And I do feel I love LA and Orange County, and I do feel like LA can be a little transient, but I think people go to LA for a specific reason. I think sometimes people come to San Diego because they wanted something a little bit different, and then they end up finding their way here.
Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Great
Now,
questions. No one's ever asked me that before. Thank you.
yeah.
That's fun.
Now, Malcolm, if we're gonna go back to when you were just graduating in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and from undergrad, and we're gonna ask you to give your younger self some advice based on everything you've learned since you graduated from college, what kind of advice would you give your younger self?
It only gets more competitive.
Okay, explain that one. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
So from time to time, you know, I try to stay connected with the team, and I'll get a call or reach out from somebody that's wanting to find out something, or they've got a great, student athlete program where they'll have mentors. And so I'll volunteer from time to time, just talking about business or whatever it might be. And I come from a non-traditional business background. My undergrad was actually in psychology, and I have a very kind of human first approach in the way that we do some things. And maybe hopefully that came across in the show.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I often get calls, and a lot of people kind of graduate, especially if you're a student athlete, you kind of graduate and you take a deep breath, because you're like, man, thank goodness it's not going to be as competitive, or my scores are not going to be up on the board every single week or whatever. I completely disagree. I think it only gets more competitive. The funnel gets tighter. And I just think that's what it comes down to. And you've got to embrace that, or it will embrace you. And so I tend to preach that a lot to people coming out, is you've got to be willing to continue to say, looking in hindsight, the last 60 days or 90 days or whatever measurement you want to put, and say, how did I truly improve 1, 2, 3, or 4%? And so, I was just, similar to you guys are doing at the show. I've got a good friend in Albuquerque, owns a couple businesses, and I was just called him last week to say, hey man, thanks for just sharing your challenges this year. Because I felt like I was on an island on some of the things that we were going through. And so, it's true. Like, it just gets more difficult. And I think business particularly will always exist. Commerce always exists. There's some slowdowns that happen, but money's flowing and people are trying to make transaction and make relationships business wise, that you've got to find a way to get yourself in those conversations. And so that's what I would tell myself, is that it doesn't get any less competitive. It's just about continuing to build and build.
Love it. Mandy, over to you to close us out.
Well, I want to ask you about podcasting for your business, because you clearly have a podcast strategy. You pitched us why we look at your links. You've been on a lot of different shows, and I'm assuming you've cold pitched them as well. And I think, I think we were talking at the beginning of the show how 135 million Americans are watching or listening to podcasts right now. It is an important part of the marketing strategy for all business owners. So how did you come to this on your own, and how do you see podcasting in your future, being a guest on a podcast or having your own?
Yeah, fair question. One, I like to, give as much away as possible. There's obviously things that kind of occur, and sometimes these settings, you just get to bring out stories that I don't often tell, or they just kind of come off because you recall it in the question that's being asked. But I think more importantly, when I shared earlier, we were really in an infant stage for a long time, and everyone's business is on a different horizon. And so no criticism to anybody that feels like they're behind me or in front of me or whatever it might be. I think everyone's in a different place. And at the time, what we used to do is Malcolm would buy a business, come in and operate it for the first 6 months and try to transition out. Terrible business model. Don't ever do that if you're wanting to acquire more than one business, because people get attached to you and they get used to you. And one thing that I didn't really understand is we can come up with all the systems and all the frameworks and all these types of things, but the employees that are key to this business running they actually build a muscle set getting used to asking you or the former owner the questions. Every single day they show up and they're just ready to ask you the questions, because that's kind of their habits and their practices. And so when we realized that, hey, it's not scalable for Malcolm to buy, disconnect for 6 months, and then hopefully kind of re-engage and try to find another business to buy to keep on with the mission, we started adding people to the bench that we feel are just high value, high character, that could run these businesses with us in the future. And so that really was what the podcast came about, was where's the audience for that? How can I tap into folks that are inspired to go run a business one day? Maybe they can't put all the ducks in a row, but they would love to be a part of a mission that we're creating, where we take care of these legacy businesses kind of with a decade mindset in mind. And so that was really where it was. I wanted to figure out where that audience was, and it turns out the thesis is right. And it's been really enjoyable to kind of be able to tell the stories and be raw and real and kind of present a real face of an entrepreneur, and what this looks like. So yeah, thanks. Fair question.
I love the look of that it's more for you about recruiting and building your business than it is about buying another business. I mean, ultimately, you're probably going to find deals as a result
Yeah.
of just being out there. But if people are listening right now and they're thinking about making a change in their career, like what is appealing to you? Like, what are you looking for right now? Or how can they get in touch with you if they want to work for you?
Yeah, fair question. So we are not a stop shop kind of situation where you just kind of come in and come out. We want people that want to be in it for the long haul. And so that's what we're looking for. Somebody that likes to go build something for some time. We have truly no exit plan when we buy these businesses, which is kind of unique. There's some other folks like that, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's the majority. And so as a result, like, you've got to be wanting to be here for a little while. And so that's kind of one of our big recruiting aspects is, you can reach out to me, we can have an interview or two, but this might be a little while for us to get to know each other and to be in that process. And so we've built a program around that, training philosophies, what we do, how we think about things, and that we can have people ready to be a part of it. There's other great people out there that would love to be in a part of a business for just like a period or a certain reason. We want somebody that wants to dig their teeth in and own this, because you really will be treated like an owner. So that's a big part of it. So we've built that kind of bench out, and we're continuing to do that. We buy exclusively in Texas. So if you want to run a business in Texas and you want to be a part of a team that can fund you and go through that process, that's definitely what we try to do.
Excellent.
Well, we appreciate you joining us today, sharing and talking about, buying businesses, what's involved, what you look for. It's been very informative. So we thank you for your time. We're going to put you back to the green room, but first we'll give you a round of applause and we'll make sure that people follow you on LinkedIn as well as your website, which has been on the ticker. So just thanks again for joining us, and we'll put you back in the green room.
It was an
Thanks
honor.
for being here, Malcolm.
All right, round of applause there.
Yeah. And for Malcolm has a really cool thing on his website. It's Setserra, TSETSERRA.com. If you click on there's an index there. It's the first 100 days plan. It's a resource document of like, here's what 100 days looks like of if operationally, if you're thinking about selling your business. And I think it's a really cool document if anybody's exploring that
Yes.
idea. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Mandy, another great episode as we near the end of 2024. I can't believe it. Who do we have to look forward to next week?
Next week's our last live guest, Amani,
Yeah,
for all of 20.
that's
We
why I
got the
queued up
grand
for
finale.
2024. Yeah, yeah.
Grand finale. Eric Rosenberg from Events Business Formula. So really big in the hospitality community, very big in the meetings business, president of Events Business Formula. And I think we've both seen him speak before. I'm excited. I've never met him in person, so I'm excited to meet him virtually next week.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks again to our guest Malcolm for joining us. Make sure that you remember to rate, review, subscribe on the platform that you're watching on, share it with a friend, hit that like button, and subscribe on YouTube. And with that, thanks for tuning in live or listening to the recording, and we will see everyone next week. Take care, everyone.
Bye.